Mr. Su has breakfast with his wife in the morning. The wife complains that her father does not want to give her the gallery. In response, she says, "So what?" The man was not interested. Mr. Su said he was going to invest in a mine located in Uzbekistan, and he was giving someone instructions on the phone about this issue. An assistant came into his office. New tenants had already moved into the house built by Mr. Su's company, but the protesters were still there. Mr. Su called another assistant and ordered him to go and deal with the situation. Kim Jong-gai is one of the protesters. He had a sawmill in the area where Mr. Su was building houses. Mr. Su's assistant came to him, threatened him, and forced him to sign the documents. Mr. Su was having lunch at a restaurant, and an old friend sat down with him. He asked that Mr. Su give him Jeonyangdong, a neighborhood in Seoul. The friend behaved very unrestrained, unlike Mr. Su, who was very calm. Mr. Su was having lunch at his home cafe. He knew the owner of the cafe, and the woman started to tease him that he had become very fashionable in 10 years, that he had changed. The man replied that a beautiful woman had been the owner for 10 years. A high school student was still sitting in the cafe. The boy was one of those students who were bullied at school. Mr. Su approached the woman to pay for his lunch. The woman was outraged that he had not eaten his lunch. The student received a phone call, and he wanted to pay, but it turned out that he had forgotten his wallet at home. The hostess told him not to worry, her husband would pay for him. The boy thanked her and ran away because he was in a hurry. Mr. Su paid for himself and him. The woman said that she would give her husband a gift he would not forget because he was very successful. The student quickly ran to the roof of the house where the school children were waiting for him. Mr. Su was caught in a traffic jam. Mr. Su was talking on the phone when a young man fell on him from the roof of the house. It was the boy he had paid for in the cafe. The man came to in the hospital. He remembered how something fell on him and he lost consciousness. A nurse came into the room. She approached him and asked how the student was feeling. The nurse went to get a doctor. Mr. Su went out into the corridor where a police officer spoke to him and also called him a student. The boy looked into another room and saw him lying on the bed in a coma. The doctor ran into the room and asked the student not to strain and return to the ward. The nurse said that his father would come soon. But Pan Su's father died 10 years ago. A man ran into the room. It was Kim Jong-gai, whose husband was forced to sign the papers. Pan Su looked at himself in the mirror and saw that he was in the body of Kim Dong-hyun, a schoolboy he had paid for in a cafe. The doctor explained that he had memory loss. The father was alarmed that his son had changed the way he spoke. The doctor assured him that this was possible with amnesia. Mr. Su remembered seeing him in a cafe and what the woman said to him. He ran to the restaurant where he ate ramen. It turned out that the cafe hadn't been open for 10 years. The news about Jong Pan Su reached his friend who came to the restaurant, who was only glad that the man was unconscious in the hospital. Mr. Su came to his home in the body of a student. The house was open, and he thought that his wife had gone out again and forgot to lock the door. But his wife was sitting in the room crying. Mr. Su was glad to see her crying, but then he heard that she was crying because of the clasp she had broken. Mr. Su started to speak, but the woman saw a schoolboy in front of her and started to run away. She called the security and the boy was taken to the police station. At the police station, he was asked why he did this, whether he wanted to steal something. His father stood up for him, saying that it was only after he fell and his head was messy, he didn't realize what he was doing. Kim Jong-gai promised that he would punish his son and that this would not happen again. Mr. Su returned to the hospital. In the ward he tried to return to his body. He jumped on his body many times trying to get back into it, as Dong-hyun fell on him from the roof. Pan Su's assistant came into the room and saw this. The assistant ran up to the boy and demanded an explanation for what he had seen. The aide recognized the boy and wanted to hit him, but a nurse ran into the room and broke them up. Pan Su came to Dong-hyun's house. Mr. Su asked his father if he had a job. Dong-hyun replied that he used to have a good job, but now he works in a store. Mr. Su buttoned Dong-hyun's shirt on the top button and said that a man should be neat and take care of his appearance. The father prepared a lot of delicious food for his son. Mr. Su was surprised that Dong-hyun was eating so much. Mr. Su said that he doesn't eat everything, but Dong-hyun gave him one bite, and when he tasted it, his eyes went dark and he regained consciousness after a while. There were already empty plates on the table. Dong-hyun ate everything. The father began to praise his son, but he pulled away and asked him not to do so. Dong-go said that they would go to school to find out what had happened. The father did not want to leave without knowing the truth. Pan Su was not acting like a student in the classroom. The father asked the principal what could have happened. His son could not have committed suicide. Mr. Su said he would find out for himself and let the father go home. The boy would return to school. Mr. Su was brought to the classroom where Dong-hyun was studying. He sat down in an empty seat. His neighbor said that a lot had happened since he had been away from school. Mr. Su studied the way his classmates looked at him. In the cafeteria, he saw that his neighbor was fulfilling the whims of students who thought they were cool and how they bullied his classmate, forcing the girl to eat rice with a phantom. The girl listened to them and ate. Then she said she was done. The girls didn't like that, and one of the bullies flipped the food on the girl. Mr. Su could not stand the noise and said that he should be allowed to eat. A boy came up to Mr. Su and started threatening him, calling him bidzik, and wanted to hit him, but teachers came into the cafeteria and the boy made an appointment to meet Mr. Su after school. After school, the students met. Mr. Su asked who he was. The boy said that nothing had changed, that he would come to him with a hamburger and strawberry milk. Mr. Su asked if he was some kind of errand boy. The bully wanted to hit Pang Su, but he beat him to it and hit him himself. Pang Su asked the bully who Dong Hyun was and found out that he was a real loser, so he hit the bully and one of his friends a few more times and calmly walked away from them. In the restroom, the boys started beating Dong Hyun's friend and bullying him so that he would not tell what he had seen. The boys were mocking their friend, and at that time Pang Su came out of the stall and pushed them so that they all fell. The main bully's phone fell to the floor. Mr. Su picked it up. On the phone, Pang Su saw a video of Dong Hyun being bullied by his classmates, how they made him go to get a classmate's sneaker and how he fell off the roof. The main bully of the school beat the bullies for not deleting the video from their phones, and now others will know what happened. Mr. Su came to the bullies. He handed over the phone and said that he kept a copy as a souvenir and asked the main bully if he knew what would happen. Mr. Su's wife was walking with another man when a friend with whom Mr. Su had been talking in the restaurant behind his people approached them. He started to mock and asked him to close his fly, and the friend started to say that he had photos of their vacation together, and he can give these photos to her father, who does not support adultery. Mr. So came to his assistant in the ward where he was sitting near Mr. So's body. The assistant was surprised when the student began to tell him his biography, something that only Mr. Su could know. The aide was surprised to hear this and could not believe it was Mr. Su. Mr. Su asked why he was always here, as no one asked him. The assistant said that Yang keeps coming, he wants to kill him. Mr. Su told him not to worry, he would come back. The assistant replied that he was so lucky to have a young body, and that he had everything ahead of him again. It was better than living as a vegetable when he came out of the coma. In the corridor, the schoolgirls surrounded the schoolboy and one of them asked him for a date, but the boy refused, saying that he was busy. Behind them, a girl who had been bullied in the cafeteria was standing on the stairs and could not pass. The handsome man asked the girls to part ways so that the student could pass. The girls began to mock and discuss the girl, and the handsome man heard this and asked what they meant by what they said about her. Mr. Su was on the phone with his assistant. He wanted to drop out of school and move out of Dong Hyun's father's house. A girl who was being bullied in the cafeteria bumped into him, and the student lost a pink plush toy. Mr. Su picked up the toy and ran after her to give it back. The girl asked him if he hated her because she had asked him to stay out of it. Mr. Su apologized and said he didn't remember anything. Hyunjong was the girl's name, the mother shouted, and she turned out to be an old acquaintance of Pang Su. Pang Su called Mai Sung by his first name, and the woman slapped him because he was in the body of a schoolboy. Hyunjong stood up for him because he had lost his memory, but Mai Sung didn't stop, so Pang Su ran away. He was surprised that Mai Sung was Hyunjong's mother. At school, Pang Su liked Mai Sung. At school, Pang Su pulled a hair out of Hyunjong's head, and at the hospital, an assistant took a hair from Pang Su's body. The DNA showed that Hyunjong was Pang Su's daughter. During recess, the girl accused Hyunjong of stealing the tint. Pang Su stood up for his daughter. He said that he took it, tried it, and threw it away because it wasn't his shade. Mr. Su ordered his assistant to break an arm or a leg of anyone who insulted his daughter, but the assistant said that was not right. He suggested that it was better to talk to her about it. Mr. So went to Min Sun and told her that her daughter was an outcast at school. Mr. So heard from Min Sung personally that it was his daughter. Mr. So's wife told her father that Mr. So had stolen from them, embezzling $3 million. Mr. So asked the assistant how he could befriend his daughter. The assistant said that he needed to take care of his body because he would die of hypertension before he would return to his body. Mr. Su asked Mai Sung to send her daughter to the gym, where they were to have a martial arts lesson, where Mr. Su's assistant was to teach the girl. Pang Su made an incredibly handsome man out of Dong Hyun. All the girls were asking who he was. Hyunjong and Pang Su came to her house to have lunch. Pang Su saw his daughter's baby pictures. He took a picture with his phone. Dong Gai, who was walking home from work, was confronted by men who started beating him. Mr. Su saw this and stood up for Dong Hyun's father. But the father didn't let his son fight and covered him with his body. The men were beating Dong Hee. Kim Dong Hee fainted. Pan Su's assistant came to the office of the main man who had been beating Dong-hee, and his men beat everyone in the office. The assistant offered to reconsider Kim Dong-ge's debt. The assistant admitted that Kim Dong-hee was Pang Su's father. Pang Su prepared lunch for Dong-hyun's father. Dong-hee said that he had received a phone call and was told that he only had to pay back what he borrowed, no interest. In class, Pan Su looked at his daughter's baby picture. In the cafeteria, the girls started to bully Hyunjo again, but she started to respond, which attracted the attention of everyone in the cafeteria. The girls wanted to beat her up, but she fought them off. My-sung called Pang Su to thank him for helping her daughter. The woman cooked the ramen she used to eat with him in school. He said that it was delicious and could be sold, but the woman said that she would not do so because she hated the person with whom she had eaten it. The woman said she wanted to kill her daughter's father. She also noticed that Dong-hyun looked like him. He was constantly wiping something. A drunken guest came to the restaurant. The man hit a woman on the ass. Pan Su stood up for the woman and fought with the men. My-sung stopped the fight and asked who he was to call her by name. Pang Su told the truth, and the woman asked him questions that only Pang Su could know. My-sung recalled their last meeting, when Pang Su said he would marry someone else. Hyunjung told Pang Su that her mother had forbidden her to talk to him. A handsome boy from school approached them and invited Hyunjung to a party. He noticed that his daughter liked him, even though she denied it. Hyunjung came to the party. The girls were talking about something bad happening to Hyunjung at the party, and Dong-hyun's friend overheard. My-sung came to see Pan-sung, and Pan-sung apologized. The woman asked him if he would have asked her for forgiveness if he hadn't had such a ridiculous situation. Did he try to find her before? He had somehow lived without her, and she was a burden to him that he wanted to get rid of. He kissed a woman in a restaurant and got slapped in the face for it. A friend called and told him that something was going to happen to Hyunjung. Mr. Su rushed to the party. At the party, Hyunjung was forced to drink alcohol. She refused and found out that she had been invited to the party on purpose. Handsome poured alcohol on Hyunjung. Mr. Su broke into the party and wanted to take his daughter away. The students surrounded him and tried to beat him up, but they failed. Mr. Su took his daughter away. The assistant came to see Mr. Su at the hospital, but he saw guards outside the ward and was not allowed to enter the ward. The assistant told him that they thought he had stolen money before the incident. One of his classmates came to see Pan Su and offered to date him, but he refused. Hyunjung approached him and asked what he had talked about with the classmate and if she had offered to date him. He replied that he couldn't date schoolgirls. Hyunjung suggested that he date her, and Pan Su was offended and left. Hyunjung told her mother that she told Dong-hyun that she loved him, and her mother yelled at her. My-sung came to the school to talk to Pang Su about her daughter's falling in love with him. The woman asked him to leave so that her daughter could not see him. Mr. Su asked what he should do to make her forgive him. Hyunjung heard part of their conversation. Pan Su said that he loved My-sung. A friend of his, whom he had met in a restaurant, came to see Pan Su. The friend wanted to kill him, but Pan Su regained consciousness. Dong-hyun in the body of Pan Su came to the house where he lived when he was himself. He came home and saw his body in front of him. He explained everything to the men. Dong-hyun in Pan Su's body told Dong-ga what only he could know. His father had to believe it. He couldn't believe how it had happened. Pan Su asked Dong-hyun for help. He knew that the boy liked Hyunjung, and he could make sure that they would meet later. Pan Su's wife was on the phone with a man who came to Pan Su's restaurant, saying that her husband had regained consciousness and escaped from the hospital. The woman was worried that Pan Su's body might come to his father. Pan Su and Dong-hyun went to see My-sung. Pan Su lied and said that after Pan Su's body woke up, they switched souls again. Pan Su's body took My-sung's hand and apologized for the past. People from Pan Su's wife came to the restaurant. Pan Su sent Dong-hyun and My-sung to a room and stayed with the men in the hall. Pan Su fought with the men. Pan Su was very well trained in martial arts. Pan Su was hit on the head with a bottle, which made him lose coordination, and Yang grabbed him. My-sung rolled the gas cylinder out of the room and threatened that if they did not leave her house, she would blow them all up. She was already angry with her husband for leaving her pregnant and raising her daughter alone all these years. The bandits left the house. My-sung approached Pang Su and began to tell him how she had been waiting for him for a long time, how her daughter resembled him, how she missed him. They met again 17 years later. My-sung began to stroke Pan Su's face and they hugged each other. Pan Su's wife came to her father. He told his daughter that what he hated most was being stabbed in the back. The father handed his daughter a letter from his son-in-law, which contained the whole truth about the plot against him. Dong-hyun in the body of Pan Su came to his father-in-law. His wife asked him what was on his mind. The father-in-law appointed Pan-soo as the official heir to the company. His wife was furious and told him that he had a high school daughter, whom he went to see right after the hospital. Dong-hyun told the truth that he found out about his daughter when he was hospitalized. The man said that his family was the most important thing for him now. He had been living with regrets all these years and didn't want to do that anymore. His wife thought he was crazy and left the house. His father-in-law said that as the father of a stupid daughter, he could not stop him and that Mr. Soo could do as he pleased. He thanked Dong-hyun for what he said. His wife was speeding toward the men, so Pan-soo pushed Dong-hyun away and only one of them was hit. Mi-sung and Hyun-jong ran to the hospital. Hyun-jung asked her mother if the man standing next to them was her father. Mr. Soo in Dong-hyun's body confessed to his daughter that he was her father. He apologized for not being there when she was born, when she started walking. Pang-soo and Dong-hyun fainted at the same time. A woman came to Pang-soo in Dong-hyun's body, the same woman who had promised him an unforgettable gift. After 6 months, the real Dong-hyun returned to school. All his classmates welcomed him. The bullies who had insulted him left the school. Mr. Soo resumed his relationship with Mi-sun. Mi-sun opened a restaurant where the whole family worked.